When we think of major threats, we usually picture something we can see. But some of the biggest dangers are nearly invisible, carried by tiny creatures like mosquitoes and ticks. In this explainer, we're going to map out how scientists are tracking these vector-borne diseases, a threat that's quietly spreading across the globe.
And just how big a threat are we talking about? Well, get this. Every single year, there are more than 1 billion cases of vector-borne diseases around the world. That's a truly mind-boggling number of people getting sick. To put that into perspective, the World Health Organization says these diseases make up more than 17% of all infectious diseases. So yeah, this isn't some rare niche problem. It's a massive, persistent global health challenge.
So, what's the common thread here? What in the world do mosquitoes, ticks, and even some freshwater snails have in common? Well, the answer is they are all vectors.
And that brings us right to our first big topic. Let's get a handle on what a vector actually is, because really, understanding their job is the key to understanding how these diseases get around.
Okay, so a vector is basically a living delivery service. It's an organism, usually a blood-sucking insect, that picks up a pathogen, a virus or bacteria from one infected animal and carries it over to a new one. They're basically the middlemen of the microbial world.
But, for an outbreak to actually happen, you need more than just the vector. To explain this, scientists use this really simple but powerful idea called the disease triangle, or what's more formally known as the epidemiologic triad. So this triad has 3 essential parts. First, you need the agent. That's the germ itself, whether it's a virus or a bacteria. Second, you need a host. That's the person or animal that gets sick. And third, the final piece of the puzzle, you need the right environment, the right climate, the right habitat, all those outside factors that let the agent and host actually cross paths. And here's the key. For a disease to really take off, all 3 of these points have to connect. This simple model is so powerful because it gives public health officials 3 different angles to attack the problem. If you can break just one side of that triangle, say by protecting the host or changing the environment, you break the chain of transmission. You can stop an outbreak in its tracks. Let's see how this works with a real-world example.
All right, let's make this real. We're going to dive into our first case study, West Nile virus. This is a perfect story of how just one little piece of that environment point on our triangle, temperature, can change absolutely everything. The way West Nile virus gets around is pretty interesting. It's not really a human disease, to start with. It's a bird thing. Mosquitoes get it from infected birds and then pass it along to other birds. But sometimes those mosquitoes bite us. Or horses. We're called dead-end hosts because we get sick, but we don't really pass it on.
And this right here is where temperature becomes the absolute game changer. For a mosquito to be able to pass the virus on, the virus has to multiply inside it first. At a nice, warm 30 degrees Celsius, this only takes about a week. But if you drop that temperature down to 20 degrees, it can take a whole month. So warmer weather just dramatically supercharges the whole cycle, making transmission way more likely. And you can literally see the impact of this on a map. After it first showed up in New York City back in 1999, it just exploded across the country. In only 5 years, it had traveled all the way across the entire continental US.
Okay, so from a story of temperature, let's switch gears to our second case study, Lyme disease. If West Nile is a story about temperature, Lyme is really a story of place, all about how specific habitats and how we interact with them can drive the risk.
The vector here is the black-legged tick, and it has this 3-stage life cycle. It starts as a tiny larva feeding on things like mice. Then it becomes a nymph, and it's this nymph stage that's actually responsible for most human infections. And finally, the adult tick feeds on bigger animals, like deer. Each stage needs a different host and a different habitat to survive.
So the big question is, why are we seeing so much more Lyme disease? Well, it's pretty much all about changes in the environment. We've got more forests, which is great, but that's also perfect tick habitat. Animals like deer are spreading out, and we're building our homes further and further into these woody areas, putting us right in their path. And the results are, well, they're striking. If you look at a map from 2001, the cases are really tightly clustered in a few spots. But fast forward to 2019, wow. Not only are those core areas much more intense, but the disease has clearly spread out into neighboring states. The map is changing right before our very eyes. Okay, so these maps can look pretty scary, but the good news is they also point us toward the solution. When you're faced with threats that are spreading like this, how do you fight back? Well, it's all about using data to make even better maps, a kind of modern toolkit for public health defense. Generally speaking, scientists have two main playbooks for this. The first is data-driven. You start with the known disease locations and then use computers to find other places that have similar features. You're basically letting the data speak for itself. The other way is model-driven. This is more like starting with a theory, like we know this tick needs a certain temperature to survive, and then mapping all the places on Earth that fit the bill. And all of this is building toward the future of disease defense. We're moving towards something that sounds like science fiction, but it's becoming very real, building a digital twin of our environment to monitor and predict these threats almost in real time. And here's what that system actually looks like. It all starts with collecting tons of data, from sensors, official reports, even reports from regular citizens. Then, all that different data gets pulled together in the cloud. After that, experts in powerful AI tools analyze it to find patterns. That's when you can act, sending resources exactly where they're needed most. And it doesn't stop there. You then monitor the results to see what worked, creating this constant loop that helps get ahead of the next outbreak instead of just reacting to the last one. So, that leaves us with this final thought. The vectors, the diseases, our environment, it's all constantly changing. Our ability to map these invisible threats has to change even faster. The challenge isn't just about fighting the diseases we know today, it's about building the tools to map the ones we're going to face tomorrow.